Okay, we're recording now. So one thing about this, like I said, I haven't prepared anything other than the review sheet to review. What I would like you to do is to look at the review. If you don't understand something, if you're not sure, we'll talk about it. And part of having the review session in that way is it gets you to start looking at things and asking questions, right? That gets you to start thinking about how you're going to, that's part of studying. And as we walk through together how to answer the questions, that's going to help you understand the material more. Right? It also gives me an idea of where you're maybe understanding things or misunderstanding things, and that can affect how I write the test. So we'll open the floor then. Yeah, Julie.
Will you be pulling the questions on the test directly from here, or are these just guidelines, or how do you do?
Right. Most of the, so for example, the ID questions, like it says on the test there, I list 5 IDs. 3 of those will be on the test. You will choose one, so there's no surprises there. If you prepare at least 3 of these ahead of time, at least one will be on the test, right? And remember, when you're answering those, you want to tell me basically what it is, where it is, approximately when it is. Within a few decades, within a century or so, it's fine. Oh, and by the way, I said I'm not going to be asking dates. I will sometimes ask you the order of things, but those will be things within the same context. So for example, I may ask you, which comes first, the Industrious Revolution or the Industrial Revolution? And that's important because they're conceptually linked, right? The Industrious Revolution leads into the Industrial Revolution. So that's an example where I don't ask you for the date, but you need to know the order. Know that the French Revolution comes after the American Revolution, because those things, and those are things, like I said, I'm not going to pick something from the Mughals and then ask you to compare that with something in Japan just out of my hat, right? It's only things that are logically connected. The sources section, sources questions will appear in the multiple choice and the short answer. But remember, one thing I want to recommend is when you're studying, really focus on the PowerPoints. Right? Start with the PowerPoints. If you don't understand something, then you can go back to your book. If I bother to type something out, that's usually a pretty good sign that it's something I think is important. Because it takes me time, right, to type out those things. Like I said, I don't want to trick you. I go over stuff in class because I think it's important. The themes are going to be focused more on the short answer. Right? The terms and names you're going to see more in multiple choice. But in general, I mean, when I'm preparing the review sheet and when I'm preparing the midterm, I'm going back and forth between them. So a lot of times they're going to appear. And even if I don't ask a question, for example, I may not ask a question about Dejima, but it may appear as a wrong answer as one of the possible answers, right? So it's good to know it. But generally, this stuff is going to, for the most part, I'd say 3/4 to 80% is on the test directly. So if you prepare this, you should do just fine. And of course, be looking through this. We got, as long as you guys, or till the end of class, maybe a few minutes more, we can talk about this. Yeah, Karen.
What do you want us to know from the sources? Like the author we need to know,
Oh.
the main argument?
Right. Yeah, I'm not going to just ask you the author. I'm not going to say who wrote this. But what I may ask are some of the overall points. What is the significance of this source? So it's good to know kind of where it's coming from. And you'll notice these sources are all things either I presented on or your fellow students presented on. Right? So if you go back and say, okay, what was that discussion about? What did Professor Rausch, what did he have in the PowerPoint? So for example, a true and exact history of the island of Barbados. What was kind of the overall, what was that document about, basically?
Explain the sugar trade from the perspective of like how the 3 different classes of the locality.
Right, exactly. And it was comparing who? Which were the different classes of people that were compared here? Right. And who was treated better? Right, that was a big thing. Right, excellent. That was what we were focusing on there, was that classrooms. Because part of our purpose of our class is to understand slavery is different in different cultures and different times. Another example, history of a voyage to the land of Brazil. What was the point of that?
show the comparison between the natives and the Europeans at the time of religious conflict in France, and show that the natives that were living on such like few possessions were living and putting their faith into nature as opposed to God, were living better than the Europeans who
Right.
had all these possessions and had faith in God. So he was using that as a motive to tell them that they needed to become more Christian in order to like become better than the natives.
Right, exactly. Even though this guy, this French Huguenot, this French Protestant, is in this country, or is in these among all these native peoples, and they're living very happily, not risking their lives, not killing themselves, trying to get wealthy. Whereas he's saying, we Christians are so greedy, and these natives, even though they don't believe in God, they're acting better than us. And he doesn't say, let's get rid of Christianity then. What he says is, we need to be better Christians. So it's using this kind of idea of the noble savage to criticize Christians, not to make them not be Christians, but to make them be better Christians. Right, excellent. So does that answer your that was a long answer for your question, Julie. Hopefully that gave some information. Yeah, Drew.
I guess just in general for any questions, how long answer are you going to want? I mean, I write out a page paper for each of these 4 tests and come in. Well, I mean, just how long an answer are you going to
I'm not usually looking for a certain length. I mean, sometimes people are very succinct and will hit the ID in very few words. That's fine. I think shorter papers are harder to write than longer ones. I need to basically see 2 sections. You need to show me that you understand where this kind of concept comes from, what it is, and why it's important. And the more, what I should point out, I'm looking also for details. It's not important. Let me look at an example. To show you details. Zheng He, you can say this guy, he's important because you identify him as going out to get tribute. Or actually, let's do it together. Okay. So who's Zheng He? Okay, Drew.
It's a Chinese admiral. He sent out the treasure fleet to try and get a bunch of the countries around him to submit them as tributaries.
Right, exactly. And which dynasty is sending him out? Ming. Ming dynasty is doing it. And that's when I'm looking for when. That's the kind of when. Give me the right dynasty.
Wait, where is this listed?
Oh, it's an ID question. The guy with the name of Z-H-E-N-G. I'm sorry. It looks like it's pronounced like Zheng He. H-E in Chinese written as Ha. So it's Zheng He, which is bizarre, but that's the rule. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So like Drew said, it's this Ming dynasty admiral who's leading a treasure fleet. Where does he go?
Goes all around this. I think he goes to India.
Right. Right. I think he gets all the way even to Eastern Africa. Right. He goes to India, Eastern Africa, and as you point out, he's looking for tributary states. Why do they want tributary states? Why is that a big deal for China? Why spend all this money sending this gigantic fleet out there? Yeah, Drew.
Because they're the center of the world and most important, and everybody should bow down.
Right.
Greatness.
Exactly. That's their worldview, right? We're the greatest. Everyone else should recognize it. And what advantage would that give them to have people recognize it? Remember, they actually kidnapped someone and forced them to. They kidnapped I think a king in an Indonesian island and forced him to come back to China and accept tributary status. Why would they do that? Remember going back, how do states convince people they have, why should you rule, right? Well, I rule because even foreigners recognize how virtuous and great I am, right? They didn't say, oh, we kidnapped this guy and forced him to come back. They'll present him in court and he'll say, oh, I've come because you were so great and mighty and I want to, pay my respect and show fealty to you. And of course, if you're the people watching this, right, you're saying, wow, our emperor's awesome. Our state is awesome. Right? So it helps legitimize your rule. Why though? So that's already a pretty solid answer, right? You told us who this guy is, what he is, and why, so forth. And you're in this what you're talking about. And you can talk about this as important. I'm sorry, so you identify him, he's this Ming Dynasty admiral who sent out tribute fleet. And that's you got to win. Why is this important? It's important because this helps bring legitimacy to the government. It helps the dynasty to rule, right? And that's probably about a B answer. Right? If you want to get that up to an A, we need to put that into a bigger, larger overall theme of the course. An important overall theme of the course, why does the West, which when we start the course is so weak, and Asia is so strong, why does the West in the beginning like the 1700s and so, well, a little earlier with military strength, but especially as where we're at right now, is becoming really powerful, right? The Industrial Revolution tips the power base to the West, away from Asia, and the West is becoming powerful, right? How does Jung-Ha fit into that? Phil.
During the Ming Dynasty, one of the emperors stopped him from making his voyages, which kind of stopped the progress they had with being a dominant power.
Exactly. The Europeans don't have anything. Or I should say they don't have anything. Europe isn't wealthy. That's why they go out. Europeans are military have-nots. That's why they have to go out, because they're looking for wealth. They're looking for treasure. The people in China, they say, we've got everything. Why should we bother going out? And so like you said, they stop it. And this leads to two things, basically. China is not interested, the government is not interested in international trade. Right? So this could be, remember, this is about tributaries, not about trade. The Europeans go out for trade. They go out to make money. That's not why China went out. And so when they served this purpose, they got the tributaries, they turned around and came back. Right? Whereas the Europeans kept going to embrace commerce. So we want the Europeans, we don't have anything, we need to go out and get some money. Right? We need to get knowledge about the rest of the world. And because of this, then the Europeans, they start trading right, and this helps develop their economies, which then, as we talked about earlier, helps lead to the Industrial Revolution. Right? And this is what gives them this power. So this openness to go out and explore, this openness to go out and trade, that's lacking with the Ming and with the Qing. And that's one reason that even though they're very powerful for a long time, they become weak over time. So that's more of an A answer, right? Does that make sense? So you can think, the first part is just to identify what, who, and where, and how, and all that stuff. Second part, give me an idea of how this person fits into the country itself, right? Chinese history. Then you get that, that's probably about, like I said, about a B answer. Get that into global history. Tell me how it fits into the world at large. You've got your A. Right, so that's kind of a long answer, but I hope that gives you kind of an idea of what I'm looking for. You write to that. If you can do that in 6 or 7 sentences, that's fine. The main thing is I'm looking for those kind of 3 things. Basic knowledge of who and what it is, how it fits into the national history, how it fits into global history. You do that, you're good. Yeah, Julie.
Can you just do a quick review on the Muslim dynasties and their religious policies?
Sure.
Actually,
Let's see. Right, first of all, what are the Muslim dynasties? Someone name one for me. Yeah, Drew? Ottoman. And Ottoman are connected to what modern nation state? Turkey. Who's the next? Safavid. And they're connected with? Iran, yes. Excellent. And then the third one? Mughals. Thank you. And they're connected with? India. Excellent. Okay. In the Ottoman Empire, are there more Muslims? Are Muslims a majority or a minority? Majority. Okay, excellent. Do they rule, though, non-Muslim minorities? A significant number of non-Muslim minorities. Yes. They have large, remember, the Janissaries are from Christian families generally, and are taken and may convert to Islam and then may serve the emperor. I'm sorry, the Sultan, right? So if you have this multi-ethnic, multi-religious policy near the Ottomans, what kind of policy are you going to follow in terms of your religious policy towards these non-Muslims? Tolerance, right. exactly. So that's the Ottoman Empire. The Safavids, are they the majority or the minority?
Majority.
Majority. Do they have a large number of non-Muslim minorities?
No.
No. Right, so what they do is they use Islam to unite their people. Specifically, remember what kind of Islam they use? Shia. Right, they use Shia Islam to unite their people together. The Mughals, are they in the majority or the minority? Minority, right. So what kind of policy do they follow generally? Tolerance, right, exactly.
They're minority?
Yeah, in Mughal India, you have Muslims ruling a majority of Hindus. Right, so they have to be careful. Now, I have to stress, they weren't always following a tolerant policy. For example, Aurangzeb did. Do you remember who's the Mughal emperor that we normally associate with tolerance? Akbar. Thank you. Excellent. So Akbar, a lot of times when you think tolerance, he's late 16th century. Let's see, that question was...
Safavid Empire, were they specifically non-tolerant, or were they just, they had no reason to be tolerant? They were mostly...
No, they were very non-tolerant because they're Shia Muslims. And there was a case where they forced Sunni Muslims to become Shia Muslims. So even against other Muslims, they were intolerant. But the idea was they wanted to use that to unite their country. That's one reason they don't get big. The Ottoman Empire is able to get gigantic because they're willing to tolerate these differences. So the Persians are not. The Safavids are not. Yeah, Julie.
How China was able to stay united.
Okay. Right. Let's see. Remember how I'm trying to think of a good way to do this. In Korean, this is pronounced sa. It means I. In Japanese, it's watashi. What does that tell you? Those sounds sound completely different, right? But how could that help keep people united? Everyone can read it. So you have a shared language that is a shared written language that all people can read. Right? So you're able to have people, in China, people speak many, many different languages. But in a sense, and this is how you can unite people, because even though you spoke many different languages, the written language was the same, so people could write. You could write a letter to anyone within China, and they could read it. In fact, this is one reason China, or Japan and Korea adopt Chinese characters, because they could also do the same thing. They could write letters to Chinese people. They would understand it. And when you were studying Chinese characters, and you were a young man, why were you studying them? For what purpose?
The exam.
Exactly. The exam system. So this is another important element of what's able to unite China, is that people have to take, you have this gigantic empire, and you want people to feel like they're a part of that empire. Because if people don't feel like they're a part of it, they're going to break away and leave, right? So you need a way to bring people into the government, to make them feel like they're a part of it. So you have them you do this by, instead of just saying, okay, you can be part of the government because your parents were, right? Where you have nobility and hereditary rights. If you're smart, you take the test, you could be a government official. So instead of trying to rebel, I'm going to read and study so I can be a government official, right? It's a way of bringing people into the government, making them loyal. And remember, even if you don't if you pass remember, you have to pass 3 tests to become a government official. But if you only pass 1, you have a bunch of privileges. You can't be forced to do labor. You can't be beaten by the government. And you're exempt from certain taxes. So everyone's encouraged, even if you can't become a government official, to take the test because it gives you special privileges. And if you have those kind of special privileges, why do you want to get rid of the government that enforces them? So that's one reason they're able to build this gigantic empire. And it's those people, right? Remember I said that the Chinese government is broad, but not deep? Those are the people who are going to cooperate with the government officials and rule. Right? The other important point is the content of the exams. Are these exams, are they on like accounting or police work or any kind of practical knowledge? No, what religion are they on? They're from Confucianism, yeah. And Confucianism tells you to do things like, it'll say things like, the emperor is heaven and the ministers are earth. Heaven should serve earth. I'm sorry, yeah, earth should serve heaven. Right? You should be loyal to the government and filial to your parents. Right? It's a doctrine. So not only is this integrating people, it's integrating them through a doctrine that tells them to obey and support the state. Right? It's brilliant in the way that it indoctrinates people. So in review then, we kind of, just for the first article, you have three things that are helping China stay unified. First is the written language. Second is that through the exam system, you're able to bring people into the government and give them privileges that make them supportive of the government, so they don't want to break away. So that's the practical purpose of the exam. It gives you government positions, it gives you support. The third, it indoctrinates you. The studying for the game. You spend 10, 20 years studying for these things, reading books telling you to be loyal to the government. You're going to believe that stuff after a while. Question? Oh, sorry, Karen.
Yeah, the question about how religious views of the world was being increasingly called into question. Do you want us to pick like one religion and use that as an example, or multiple religions, or multiple?
Okay. For the most part, the religion that we'd be dealing with is Christianity, because it's not really, the other religions aren't really being called into question. Let's look at the sources to kind of try and answer that. What did Voltaire say about religion? What was the tension there? Yeah, Drew.
Religion is best when it's weakest and native.
Right, yeah. Yeah, exactly. He's saying we need lots of different religions, because then religious people won't kill each other. Right? And so, and where was the place that he wanted people to assemble? That when he gave his example of what religious tolerance leads to, where was it? Where was the gathering place?
Trade market.
Yeah, stock market. Right, trade market. Right, exactly. Right, everyone gets along there, and then they can go home and be at peace. They can be, as long as they put their religions aside, they can all get along. So in Voltaire, you see religion going from a source of meaning and a source of a way to legitimize and justify governments to being dangerous, to be seen as something, not as a cause of unity, right? Remember, that's why in the Reformation, right, you have these people developing state churches. It's to unify their populations. Voltaire is now saying, no, unified religion is bad. It leads to inquisitions. It leads to death. We want lots of different religions. And so religion is dangerous. So we want lots of different religions because religion is not really important. Other things unite us. So instead of religion being very important and being good because it unifies, it's bad because it divides and leads to violence. So that's an example from our sources of how this is happening. How about On World Geography by Christopher Columbus?
Explains his why he decided to sail or try to reach the West Indies.
Right.
Because he thought it was a way of getting closer to God by finding the Garden of Eden.
Right. They're using the Bible. They have two sources of knowledge, right? They have scientific sources and so forth, and then they have the Bible. And these two sources of knowledge are in tension with each other, right? It's like, well, paradise has to be someplace on earth, right? He has this idea, this pear-shaped world, right? With the paradise on top of the pear. Or he thought the world looked kind of like this, right? And then paradise is up here. And of course, though, what happens, and you can always kind of locate paradise somewhere else. But when you explore the whole world, you say there is no paradise on earth. There is no spot like this. So what you have is through exploration, through meeting different peoples, you start to question these kind of old, meaningful ideas, these old ideas of meaning, especially when you run into advanced civilizations. You say, okay, these people aren't Christian, but they're certainly civilized. They don't seem like bad people. How do we deal with that, right? And that kind of calls into question these old religious ideas, right? Because you're trying to use the Bible as a source of knowledge, but over time, it doesn't seem to be giving you that kind of practical knowledge where, for geography and so forth, whereas science does. And you see that in particular in not on there. Well, it's not on there, but I'll as a source, but you could certainly use it in the short answer question is do you remember with the Isaac Newton, the introduction, what was going on in that introduction that we looked over in class? It was really hard to understand. I hope I make it clear. Did the author believe in God? The introduction?
He's a deist.
Right, he's a deist, right. Right, remember he's coming down to miracles. So he believes in God, but he's basically, there is no miracles. Everything works according to natural law. And what he says is the only knowledge we can have is knowledge from our experience, from our senses. Right? That's the only true knowledge. This is connected to this rise in scientific world. Well, wait a second. We can't test the Bible scientifically. I can't run an experiment on God. So this starts to lead to questions. There's changing understanding of how knowledge works. Whereas before, with people like St. Thomas Aquinas, you had this understanding of tradition that's passed down. Why do we believe this? Our fathers believed it. We believe it because it's on good authority. It's in the Bible. It's sacred authority, right? That's why we believe this. But now you're saying, no, we can't be sure of that type of knowledge. Those people could have been wrong. We have to go out and see it ourselves. And so this leads to questions of religion. In this case, what this led to was, let's get rid of this person is saying, I don't really believe in this Christianity, but I still believe in a God. I'm not an atheist, I'm a deist. Where you believe in a God that creates the world, is concerned with morality and punishes people in the afterlife if they're bad and rewards them if they're good, but doesn't really interfere who isn't going to be doing miracles. And what about in the Galileo's example, the source? Do you remember what that was about? That was a while back. That's one of our sources.
I'm talking about like the authority of Scripture over,
Mhm.
or opposed to like scientific observation. And
Right.
reason.
Exactly. He's saying this is the way the world works. I know it works because I'm observing it directly. And then people are saying, no, you must be wrong because the Bible says this. And he's saying, well, that's what it says, but you're misunderstanding the meaning. Right? It actually means this. You're misinterpreting it. And what he argues then is that it's not for the church to interpret. It's for me, Galileo, to interpret based on my scientific knowledge, right? So science in these ways are challenging this. And this is something I may ask for an example. For example, in the short answer. So this will give me a concrete example. Okay, how are religious worldviews being called into question? In large part by the expansion of knowledge and new ways of knowing, right? Especially the scientific worldview that's based on direct observation. And to give a really strong answer there, in the short answer, it's good to point, for example, to one of these sources. And of course, also, in Voltaire is slightly different, where you have this idea that religion isn't a source of unity, it's a source of division. It's something that's bad. And that's, of course, challenging the religious worldview because religion is no longer useful. Right? It's dangerous. Yeah, Alan.
So, for that question of religion to rule, if we use like the example of Voltaire, should we also give like the opposing example too? Like that's saying that the power comes from being against religion, but then I think there's also examples of religion unity.
Oh, if you just you wouldn't necessarily have to get that shift in there.
Oh, okay.
I just need to see why you would say Voltaire portrays religion as the source of
So if we just use
division.
it, that would be enough of an answer.
Right. Yeah, and it's a good point to give you an exact example of how he does this, where he says, if you have a bunch of different religions, they're not killing each other,
Okay.
right? And then we got rid of this danger, and he's reacting. It's good also he's reacting to the universe of religion. And so forth. Yeah, Drew.
A little off topic, but just to make sure I got my schedule right. This class doesn't meet Monday or Friday, right?
Right, exactly. It doesn't meet Monday or Friday, right? Sorry about that. I had another. In the syllabus I had on Friday, right? That's already marked up. But on Monday, I have another academic function that I have to attend. So that's why we're having I had the extra lecture, the overflow lecture, right? That I emailed you previously. That was what that class was intended for. And I sent that out with the lecture for last week. So that was all in one email, so don't be worried if you missed something. And then that's why we're having the review now.
Just making sure I wasn't.
Sure, no, thank you, yeah. So please be here next Wednesday. As soon as it will be. Yeah, Karen.
Can we go over the difficulties in uniting your?
Sure.
Just-
Okay, right. Well, it's good also to think about this in comparison to China, right? What did China have that Europe didn't have? Exactly. The one language that they had that people could share was Latin, but who was that associated with? The church, right? Papacy, right? Exactly. So they've got a language, but it's associated with religion in a sense. It's not associated so much with the state. So that's something they're kind of missing, is a united language, right? And so if we have this state here, right? We're talking about the church, right? The Catholic Church. It also has, we'll say this is a kingdom. The kingdom of X, I'll just say. Within this kingdom, you have a bishop who has land here, another bishop who has land here, and another bishop who has land here. Right? And in addition, and so it's the bishop who enforces justice here. And this land, the taxes go to the church. In addition, all these people here have to pay tithes to the church. They have to pay a special tax to the church in Rome, right? And if there's bishops and priests out here, they have, let's say there's a priest who's here. This is your territory, and he commits a crime. He's put on trial by an ecclesiastical court, not by your court. So what this means then is that all over Europe, you have other countries like this. You have this already in existence, this universal church that sees itself as already giving this unity. It's already unified, Europe in a sense, religiously. Europe's divided into all these little states. So there's a feeling, why would you need to unite all of Europe? It's already been done. But not, of course, in the way that China has done it, right? This is a spiritual unity, not a material unity. So that's one thing that happens. But in addition, it's not just these church lands and things, there's also oftentimes all these little city-states that are divided, that are separated out all around here. And these oftentimes will have their own armies and will collect taxes themselves. And so what Europe is, there's no one centralized, the individual states themselves are not centralized. And so then there's no one who has the power to unite the whole thing. Because you have the church has all these special privileges and so forth, and all these city-states have special privileges and armies and so forth. All right, so we can say it doesn't have a unified language. There's already a spiritual unity, so there's a feeling that we don't need a political unity. And also you have all these different, and because states themselves are so decentralized, no one is really powerful enough to bring everything together. They also never developed anything like the exam system. Again, the closest thing you can be is to be a priest, but then your primary loyalty is to the church. You can even think about this in terms of the Chinese emperor. The Chinese emperor is both pope and king. He unites everything in himself, so that's why he's able to unite it. But in medieval Europe, you have the church and the state, and they kind of fight. And that makes it difficult to unite them. Is that clear? Yeah. Thank you, Karen. Yeah, Alex.
Clarification, for one of the terms is rubles,
Mhm.
and I know that they're mentioned pretty frequently throughout the book.
Right.
And so are there any like specific points we should know about
Okay.
them? This is definitely.
When I list a, is that the only one I list, I think? I don't list the Safavid. I also list the Safavid Empire,
Okay.
Mughals, the Manchus, Qing Dynasty. What I'm looking for, when I just list that, if I want something really specific, I list the specific thing. So for example, I list the exam system. That's specific to China. When I list something really broad like that, especially when it's like a dynasty, I'm looking for where. So you need to know that the Mughals are based out of India. And then you kind of know, and they're a dynasty. They're an empire, right? And you also need to know, what else do you need to know? Right. And their kind of general place in the world. So the Mughals are this powerful Indian dynasty, and the countries are kind of associated with today that will help you remember these things. They're a powerful dynasty, much more powerful than the West for much of the history. Anything else, generally, I'm going to have already gotten here, put elsewhere. Let me look for example, theme, British East India Company in India, right? That's connected to Mughals. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
What I'm saying, so don't worry, you don't have to write down everything about the Mughals.
Okay.
That's just the basic information I'm looking for. Anything more specific that I'm looking for, I've got somewhere else. It's just like, I have Ottoman Empire. I also have Janissaries. Yeah, Julie.
Decline and fall of the Ming Empire.
Rise and fall of the Ming Empire. Okay, right. So the Ming, you'll remember, it's always alphabetical order. I'm sorry, not always, but with the empires, Ming comes before Qing, M before Q. That's how to keep these guys separate. That's the rule I had to follow. Let's see. How did the first Ming emperor come into power? What did he do to the previous dynasty? The Hongwu emperor. Did he say, I want to be emperor? And they just said, okay. He overthrew it. He raised up a rebellion to overthrow the previous dynasty. And that's what happened to his descendants. The last Ming emperor is overthrown in a rebellion. So that's one reason the Ming Empire falls. You have rebellions, right? Why do people rebel, generally? They're unhappy, right. And what's making them unhappy? Government. What about the government? Right? Sometimes, not quite in the Ming. It's actually the opposite problem for the Ming. The problem is the Ming government isn't able to deal with the problems that the people are facing. It's oppressive in some ways. But in one sense, they're not rebelling because the state is too strong and is beating them down. They're rebelling because the state is too weak and can't protect them. Right? For example, it can't protect them from bandits. And of course, these bandits, they don't get suppressed. Eventually, they become rebels. Right? And generally, in peasant or in traditional cultures, what are you dependent on in order to live? Farming, right. What was going on at this time period, the weather patterns were changing. And also because, and this was affecting farming in the Ming. They were having all these famines. And the government was too weak to help people. Usually in China, when there were problems, the government would bring in food and things like that, and the people would say, okay, we like the government. Now they're not bringing in food to help people survive. And lastly, remember what was the deal with silver?
This isn't the time Europe is importing a lot of it.
Right. Well, Europe is bringing silver from South America. The Spanish are bringing silver from South America to the Philippines, where then they trade with Chinese merchants. And the Chinese merchants bring that silver back to China. And Japanese merchants bring that silver to China, bring other silver, their own silver, their mining silver to China as well. And what this leads to, this helps build up and develop the Chinese economy. But in the last years of the Ming, this silver was cut off. So the silver they become dependent on dries up, and it destroys their economy. And this is one reason the government isn't able to deal with the problems it's facing. It doesn't have any money, right? And lastly, when the rebels overthrew the Ming, there were still people who were loyal to the Ming and wanted to keep fighting. Well, actually, scratch that, sorry, I should come back to that. Do these rebels who overthrow the Ming, do they then become the next dynasty? All right, who does? Right, the Qing. The Manchurian. The Qing are these people called Manchus. Right, Qing is the dynasty name, Manchus is the ethnic group. And these people sweep down, defeat the rebels, and take over China. So those are, I think, 4 or 5 reasons for why the Ming Dynasty declines and falls. Good question. Yeah, Julie.
Hybrid religion?
Hybrid religion, right. Remember the image to think of with hybrid religion, remember I showed that picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe, right? And how it brings in, when people convert to a religion, they often bring in traditional beliefs. So biblically, there's a reference in the book of Revelations to Mary as being, well, it's confusing because it's also referring to the church, but Mary and the church as being clothed with the sun. She has that kind of sun around her, and standing on the moon. She's standing on the moon. But also remember, the color of her mantle, her coat, is associated with, is a sacred color for Aztecs. And she also has this black band around her waist that shows that she's pregnant. And her her chapel, where that image is located, is built over a traditional Aztec mother goddess. So you're mixing the kind of religions together. So that's what hybrid religion is. Yeah, Julie. Congo Kingdom. Okay, where's the Congo Kingdom located? Africa, right. And what's their economy kind of based on? Slavery, right? And what religion is very strong there?
Tribal religions or Christianity?
Right, and well, the second one, right? Christianity. What form of Christianity? Catholicism. Right. The king, there's a lot of reasons why the kings embraced Catholicism. One reason was because they were hoping that they could use it to unify the state. Right, it's the Portuguese who bring that in. So that's the Congo Kingdom, in a nutshell. Lineage classification. This is on the YouTube. Well, this is on the YouTube lecture. So what's the lineage classification system? My biologists certainly know this. Yeah. You're classifying animals or plants with 2 names. So we human beings are called Homo sapiens, for example. So that's an example of how that kind of works, this system. Was that just applied to animals and plants? No, right. Who else was it applied to? People, right. It classified people. And who was on top? Which people were the best? White Europeans. Right? It classified people according to, it said, they looked at, someone, for example, looked at Greek faces, on Greek statues. They measured the angles. And then they went through and measured the angles of different races' skulls. And of course, Western Europe, or whites, our skulls are closest to these Greeks, so that means we're superior, because the Greek standard of beauty is the truest, the best standard. And mathematically, that is scientifically, that means we're better than other people.
What time period is this? Was this related to
18th century.
So was this social Darwinism?
It's leading to social Darwinism. This is connected, you want to especially connect this to the Enlightenment. Right? The Enlightenment is when you have these scientific ideas coming in. I mean, in a sense, this is pseudoscience. And what it's doing is it's justifying white supremacy. Why is it okay to go out and colonize these people? Well, scientifically, we're better than them. And that's again kind of a shift, right? Instead of saying, well, they're infidels and we need to convert them to our religion, what you're saying is, well, they're inferior to us biologically and we need to civilize them. Right? So it's a different kind of idea. Is there something else I need to say about this? Oh, right. And this feeds into another issue. Does anyone recall what I meant by this is again on the YouTube lecture, the paradox of the Enlightenment? Or is it called paradox of the Enlightenment? The Enlightenment and the problem of freedom. Right. What is the Enlightenment's problem of freedom? Well, does the Enlightenment encourage freedom or discourage freedom? Yeah, Karen.
I don't know if this is true, but I think that like the people who first started the Enlightenment didn't realize the effect it would have.
Right.
But it sort of inspired people to, like especially the French Revolution, which took those ideas and thought,
Right.
hey, everybody should be equal, everybody should be free, we should have democracy, not a monarchy anymore. So they didn't mean for it to cause this sort of
Sure.
revolution that it did.
Right. Exactly. This idea we should be more free. We should have popular sovereignty. You also have ideas like free labor, free market, free trade, and so forth. So excellent. And they didn't also, and like I said, like you emphasize equality. All people are free. Right. This is kind of the ideal. Right. But in practice, for example, do I have it still on here? I took it off. Oh no, Declaration of Rights of Men and Declaration of Rights of Women. What were those two documents? Oh.
And Declaration of Rights of Man was suggesting that there's certain rights that come about just by existing.
Mhm.
Written by John.
Right.
And it's just sort of the basis of everyone's equal as long as you're male. Then the rights of women was sort of the inverse of this, that got Malcolm killed basically in the French Revolution.
Yeah, exactly. You have this idea. I just want to check one thing. Right, I think the Declaration of Rights of Man I'm referring to is a different one. It's this one issued in 1789 that has to do with the French Revolution. And it's a legal document
Okay. So
saying how we're going to treat men. But the basic idea you said is correct. That this is giving men freedom, right? But it doesn't give women the right to vote, for example.
everyone has to pay their documents the same thing during the Enlightenment.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Really
Right. But no, that's fine. But no, what you said was right on. But then you have the second thing, especially the Declaration of Rights of Women was not a legal document. It was a woman saying, we should get these freedoms too. So the problem of freedom is how far does this freedom extend? Does it extend to men does it extend to all people? Does it extend only to white people? Does it only extend to white men? Does it only extend to white men who own property? For example, for a while in the United States, only white men with property could vote. If you were a white guy who didn't have property, you couldn't vote. I believe in the French Revolution was more radical than our own. So in the French Revolution, I think all men could vote, irregardless of whether they had property. Right? And of course, how does this work with slavery? Right, exactly. And that brings two freedoms. I'm sorry?
You gotta make a decision, either it's freedom for everyone or not.
Right, exactly. And that will often pit two freedoms against each other. Political freedom. These slaves are human beings, they should be let free. Right? But what about economic freedom? Hey, I own them, they're my property. And that pits two freedoms against each other. And the question is, which are you going to choose? In the French Revolution, for a while, they actually chose the political freedoms, that even slaves are free. In the American Revolution, we were more conservative, and we said, no, slaves are not free. And I can't remember how we got, no, that was because someone asked about Linnaeus classification, and I thought that was another important issue to deal with. Any other questions?
You guys do Dejima really quick?
All right, Dejima. That was the one we watched the video about. And what was Dejima? Drew, you better know.
It's The island in Japan where they killed Dutch people.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Drew was in my Japanese history course, and we talked about Asian there, right? And they kept the Dutch people there to keep an eye on them, but also to get knowledge about what was happening in the West. Right? This is the Tokugawa period. This is like 16, 1700s. They want to know what's going on there. Right? Whoa. For our listeners, I tried to sit on the table and that didn't work. Okay. We have one other term from Japan that was also a little video, the 47 Roman. What can you tell me about that? Yeah, Julie.
Were those the samurai that
Mhm.
they had nothing to do, and so they sought revenge and ended up having to commit honorable suicide for their actions?
Right. Well, I wouldn't start off with that they had nothing to do with it. Right. The other stuff is correct. Right. They go, their master is killed, and they go off and kill the person who caused his death, and then they celebrate, or then they turn themselves in, and they're forced by the government to commit suicide. And why does the government have them commit suicide? Yeah, Kathleen.
It was like the conflict between
Mhm.
the power of like the samurai and like
Right.
the traditional power and the power that the government
Mhm.
had over the border, and how that by getting revenge for their master, they had followed like traditional
Mhm.
samurai honor. And
Right.
The government had to deal with that instead of the government executing them. They had all of them commit honorable suicide.
Exactly. There was a conflict between values. The government demanded, you need to obey us, but at the same time, the samurai were just avenging their lord, which is a value the samurai held very dearly. Right? They said, this is our lord, we should avenge him. So they were popular in society. And so the only way out of this was to give them an honorable death, to reconcile these two very different kind of values, right? And why was this? Well, and then what happened to their story? Is this just a boring history book story?
They kind of like almost martyred, like
Right.
they were treated very honorable, and they'd done like a courageous thing.
Right. And who was doing the treaty? Like, how was this story being told? Kabuki theater, right. Because in Japan at this time, you have a growing popular culture that's extending, and this is a general theme, remember, in our course, is that you have this popular culture, not just elite culture, but popular culture, that anyone who has the money, and there's a increasing number of people who have money, can take part in. And this became a very popular Kabuki play that people were out attending, because this really struck a chord with them, this idea of virtue, right? These virtues in the poem. And so people were paying good money to go see this, but the key thing was a lot of people actually had the money to go see it. So it was popular culture. And why was it then why was this a big deal, though, right? I mean, there's lots of samurai. Aren't people doing this all the time?
Wasn't this, I might be wrong, wasn't this the beginning of the downfall of the samurai? Or not the downfall, but weren't they trying to like phase them out, kind of?
Well, they weren't being phased out, but they were changing. Their position was changing. They weren't. Remember, the Tokugawa brought peace. So now the samurai who are warriors have no one to fight because there's peace. And so they were becoming, as I think pointed out, they had nothing to do, right? And people, this was kind of, they weren't warriors anymore. And so this really caught people's imagination because they said, wow, they actually acted like samurai. And so that's why it became this big play. So this is, right, so does that make sense? Do you have any idea? Okay, so we got a couple more minutes. Yeah, Kathleen.
What exactly is the caliphate?
Caliphate. That is the Islamic, or after Muhammad dies. Muhammad is a person who unites spiritual and political and military power. And after he dies, they select someone called the Caliph to succeed in that role. And the Caliphate was supposed to continue doing that. It's destroyed by the Mongols. And then later on, other people, for example, the Ottoman Empire, claimed to be the Caliph. So you think here, Caliph, think Islam. Well, at this point, we're technically out of time. I've got another 10 minutes. Anyone who wants to go ahead and head out can, of course, do so without penalty. If you want to stay, though, and continue our conversation for another 10 minutes, please go on ahead. So people who want to go on ahead. People who want to stay, give me some more questions. Please. Sounds good. Oh, that was a good question. I will be I have to leave on Sunday afternoon. If you have questions, please get them to me by Saturday afternoon.
You want us to post these right here on a hard copy?
Yeah, I don't need a hard copy. And don't forget, if you did turn in your paper, please do so on Moodle.
The themed questions. Can we use any source of reference in this book? As reference or
Oh yeah,
just
yeah.
more
No, you can
specific
pull
books
if you
that
find
we
if you.
follow, or-
Those were just to give people kind of an idea of what I'm looking for,
Okay.
to give them some guidance. If you read something else you want to bring in, go right on ahead. That's great.
Okay. All right. I wasn't sure because it's definitely. I mean, this. Like, how is religion used to rule? Like, I could like throw Mansubis into that back.
Oh yeah, certainly could.
Cortez and
Right. I just
all
didn't.
of
I just was worried about there being just too much information. So I was like, okay, folks, know. But yeah, if you want to bring in something that's not there, that's fine.
Yeah, because I can tell you that my short answers are going to be like short essay.
Okay.
Questions, like 3 to 5 pages.
Alrighty.
These are long answers.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Hey, I was wondering, I don't remember what you said. You want us to, I was out last Wednesday, I was sick. I just learned to print it out. I don't know if we were supposed to turn it or did we just?
No, just check it against the answer key. Everyone gets a 10 out of 10.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well,
So I just wanted it there so you could check yourself, see how you're doing.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Right, no problem. Yeah, the midterm is just going to be a long quiz, basically.
Okay.
The same kind of questions are going to be there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll keep this safe.
Yeah.
The literary imposition.
Okay, sure. That was the Manchus, the Qing, these people were seen as barbarians, right, by the Chinese. And they, of course, they ruled for a couple hundred years. And they became concerned that Chinese were going to say, oh, we shouldn't be ruled by these barbarians anymore. So what they did was they were going through books. And so that's why the term literary. And if you wrote a book they didn't like, they would burn it. If you wrote something that maybe seemed to attack them. And if you wrote something really bad, they would kill you. So they burned lots and lots of books, killed a handful.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm just gonna go over
Sure.
one last time.
Oh yeah, no problem.
So, for Mohammed the Conqueror,
Right.
just like, what were the major, like,
Sure. Do you remember what he conquers?
was he Constantinople?
Yeah.
Okay.
He takes Constantinople. And what does that, how does that affect the Ottoman Empire?
Well, because the Christians in Europe had seen that as like the barrier between them and like
Right,
the
right.
Ottoman Empire, right?
Mhm.
So like by them saying that, it was like invading Christianity.
Right, right.
which them-
Yeah, and it allows them to take over a lot of Christian countries. Right, excellent, excellent. And it also, of course, is inspiring to the Ottomans. It proves that they have, they take these beautiful Christian churches and convert them into mosques and build their own mosques. And so it gives them this capital that shows how powerful they are and why God has favored them, why they should have the right to rule. And do you remember who flees from Constantinople? Who's running away?
Somewhere.
Sure.
here.
Well, it's the Greek scholars.
Okay. Yeah.
And that inspires the Renaissance.
Okay.
Because those people, because in the West, the language was Latin. The Bible is written in Greek. I'm sorry, not the Bible. The New Testament is, I think, except for one part, is all written in Greek. And of course, there's all these Greek philosophers. And so what happens is these Greek scholars inspire people to go out and look at this, to look back to these old sources. And that's a lot of what the Renaissance is let's look back at old sources to deal creatively with the new problems we are facing, right, in the wake of the Black Death and the Mongols and all that. So again, you have that kind of 3 layers, right? Tell me what it is and so forth. Tell me what it has to do for that group of people. How does this affect the Ottomans? And then how does it affect globalism?
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. All right, and that will be the end.